Advantages and disadvantages of owning a listed building in France. If you live in the UK, you'll know that any building with the slightest bit of historical interest will be listed by the local government, and then you have to jump through hoops to actually get anywhere with it. In France, there's 45,000 chateaus, but only 11,000 of them are actually listed. Why is this? Well, basically due to the advantages and disadvantages. And most listed buildings are actually done by choice of the owners. But what are these advantages or disadvantages of having a listed building in France? Before we jump into it, let's just clarify what a listed building is. So, if you've been trawling the internet, that's trawling, not trolling, looking at all those lovely dreamy chateaus for sale, well, you might have noticed in the descriptions of those properties, now again you have the mention MH or ISMH. MH stands for Monument Historique or Historical Monument, and thus means that property is a listed building in the highest category of listings. The second mention is ISMH, and this means the Inventaire Secondaire de Monument Historique, or the secondary listing of historical monuments, which is the lower level. And it's always worth checking with the agent you're dealing with to know whether the chateau you're looking at is listed or not listed. Well, what are the advantages or disadvantages of the listed building? As you know, the laws are made by politicians. Politicians in general tend to be fairly well off people. And after all, most people buying chateaus could be considered fairly well off people. So it's only logical that the laws concerning listed buildings refer to your wallet more than conservation or anything like that. The main advantage of actually owning and renovating a listed building in France is the fact you can offset 100% of the cost of the works against taxes earned in France on any rental income. And secondly, any overflow from that tax deduction can be knocked on to your income tax. Another financial advantage is that in France, especially in the big urbanised areas, the local governments have actually capped the maximum rent you can charge on a property, unless it happens to be a historical monument. And then you can just do what you want price-wise. Another factor is that when that day comes that you decide to pop your mortal clogs, then there is actually no death duties on the inheritance on a listed building. And yet another financial advantage is that the state will give you grants for the renovation of the listed buildings. If it's an MH first class listed building, then it's 35% of the costs. And if it's a ISMH second level listed building, then it's 15% of the cost. Another small financial advantage is if one day you decide to sell your listed building, then you do not have to have an energy efficiency test, or DPE as we call it. Admittedly, that's a minor cost. It's like, well, on a chateau maybe €200-300 euros. But by the fact you don't need a DPE, there's no chance of you needing an audit if you get a bad result. An audit on a chateau would be several thousand euros. Well, all that sounds well and good, but let's look at this the other way around, or from a foreign buyer's perspective. To start with, the tax advantages, the 100% deductible and all this stuff. That, for obvious reasons, only applies to taxes you're paying in France. Secondly, on the rental side, well, I can see the advantages if you buy a small listed building in an urbanised area and transform it into flats, something like that. But most of the people watching this video, you're thinking more about the actual large chateau in the open countryside in rural France. And I don't think that many of you will actually be renting those out. Concerning those famous grants, well, to start with, whether it's the 35% or the 15%, you need to put down 20% in cash on the table. When I say cash, I don't, not literally cash, but not money you've actually borrowed for the project. It has to come straight from your pocket. Another negative point about the grants is that if you apply for grants and the state accord you those grants of up to 35% of the cost of works, you have the obligation to use craftsmen which are specifically qualified for historical buildings. And these come at a cost anything from 50 to 100% more expensive than the normal day-to-day craftsman. So they're giving you 35% maybe, but you're paying 50 to 100% on top. So, no brainer for me. And concerning the renovation works themselves, when you decide on your project, you need to put plans in, which is normal for everyone. But when it's a listed building, it has to go through a special assessor who's called the Architecte des Bâtiments de France, or the Architect of French Buildings. Very pompous title, if you ask me. Well, how can I say? Talking to builders who have worked on listed buildings and other traditional buildings, they tend to refer to the Architecte des Bâtiments de France with terms along the lines of angel of death. I think you get the picture. So, conclusion. Well, the tax side, unless you happen to own a big company in France, there's absolutely no advantage there. Grant side, well, if you go for the grants, it's going to cost you more than if you didn't have the grants, so no advantage there. The energy efficiency test in case of sale, well, yes, that is a small advantage, but it's too minor to really worry about. And that leads to the fact you don't pay death duties on the inheritance of the historical monument, which is a definite bonus. But most of you watching these videos, you're in the early stages of looking for your dream chateau to flamboyantly pass the rest of your life away. We're actually thinking about what happens at the end. And that is why less than a quarter of chateaus in France have been listed by the owners. If you want to learn more about buying a chateau in France and other real estate aspects here in France, then don't forget to click on that like and subscribe and bell and that bit down there. And if you actually found this helpful, you can even buy me a coffee using the QR code on the screen or in the link in the description below. Hope to see you soon. Bye.